Vikas, we're still 3 minutes short, and
no, but I would suggest that let's start because
perfect. As I recall, Vikas, once you are the moderator for the session.
Yeah.
For those who may have joined in a little late, Vikas is a man of many interests. He's a philatelist of national merit. He has a most enviable collection of Tintin in 120 plus languages, for which he finds mention in the Limca Book of Records. His three loves are Tintin, tea, and trains, because they're all T's. Otherwise, he has many more loves, and it's his love for trains that makes him a very active member of our society. Vikas, I hand over to you to moderate the next session, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the next session we have Dr. Stephen Cossey. Welcome, sir, and it's very early morning there in US. So in Colorado, where he is currently based, it's 5:30 a.m. in the morning. Thanks for joining us so early. He is a consulting geologist and the chief geoscientist at Cossey and Associates Incorporated. He received his BSc in geology at the University of Wales and an MSc and PhD at the University of South Carolina. He is semi-retired currently, but still does some consulting projects with companies in Houston and Uruguay, and like what he wants to call fun geology projects in Mexico. I really like it, fun geology projects. Until he was 21 years old, Steve lived in England, where his grammar school was right next to London-Edinburgh main railway line, which was still operated by steam locomotives before August 1968. Many breaks and lunchtime during this time from 64 to 68 were spent leaning on the school fence watching the streamlined Gracely Class A4 locomotives speeding their way to Scotland. He was also a member of the school transporting club. Thus began his love of steam trains and railways in general. Steve has been taking steam train trips around the world in 2006 and so far has been to 28 countries on steam tours. He only regrets not having started earlier. He also restored a 1921 Baldwin steam locomotive in Colombia between 2011 and 2012 and enjoys hiking, easy bike rides, and exploring, especially off the beaten track places. In 2021, he is hoping to run some steam charters in Colombia to celebrate the 100th anniversary of his locomotive. Today, he is going to talk about a complete restoration of 1921 Baldwin in 14 months in Colombia, South America. And incidentally, 2021 is the 100th anniversary of this locomotive which he has restored. Welcome, Dr. Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen here. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, Vikas. Very thankful that you can put this conference together and let everyone around the world participate, even though it's very early in the morning here. So today I'd like to talk about our project in Colombia that was between 2011 and 2012. It was the restoration of this locomotive that you see in the picture, which is a 1921 Baldwin 260. And as you can see, it wasn't in great condition in 2011. A story about Colombia cannot be complete without mentioning Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez, who is the owner of the tourist train operation in Colombia, in Bogota. And I met him in 2010. I was lucky enough to be working in Bogota, Colombia, between 2009 and 2013. Dr. Rodriguez was trained in locomotive engineering in England, in the UK, in the 1960s. And then he gradually worked his way up the infrastructure in Colombia to be the head engineer of the National Railways in the early 1990s. But then the National Railways of Colombia were dissolved in 1992, I believe it was. And that's when he started this operation called Tourist Tren, which is a steam railway in Bogotá, Colombia, that currently has 5 working steam locomotives. So to specifically talk about the number 8, and you'll see here it says the number 3, because originally it was the number 3 when it was built. This is a Baldwin number 54816, which is important, and we'll look at that later. Built in June 1921 in Philadelphia. It worked what's called the Prolongación del Ferrocarril del Norte, which is the extension of the Northern Railway near Bogotá. It was originally a 3-foot 3 3/8 gauge, and now it's a 3-foot 914 millimeter gauge, which is what all of Colombia is right now. Originally a coal burner. We don't know much about the history of the locomotive. We know it was working or assumed to be operational between 1921 and the early 1960s. And then it was renumbered as number 8 when the railways were nationalized in 1954. And we know it was abandoned in 1967. But then we know in 1969 to 70 it was working again. So it was restored once, apparently in the late 1960s. And then in the early 1990s, we know it was abandoned in a place called El Corzo, which is where there's a workshop west of Bogotá. In 1993, it was purchased by Tourist Tren and Eduardo Rodriguez and his associates. And then it was moved from west of Bogotá to Bogotá itself in the center of the city. Bogotá is a city of about 8 to 10 million people in the center of the country. I'll show you a map in a minute. From April 2011 to June the 5th, 2012, Eduardo and his team of engineers did a frame-up boiler-on restoration project, 15 months, which I don't know if that's a record or not, but it was very quick. And I'll show you that process today. The locomotive is currently operational, and it last ran in February of 2021, just 1 month ago. As I said, there are 5 working steam locomotives in Colombia. So Bogotá is located pretty much in the center of Colombia here. Colombia is in the northern part of South America, for those of you not familiar with it. I'll show a little map of Bogotá here in a minute. So this is a railway map of the railway lines that fan out from Bogotá. Notice that the north arrow is sideways on this. I found this map. It's a great map, but it's turned sideways. So this is to the north here. Bogotá is in the center here. El Corzo is to the west. That's where one of the workshops is. And the line that the locomotive worked is this green line here, the extension of that line, which is the Northern Railway. The current operations of the railway, not all these lines exist today, and not all of them are usable, but the current operations are along the brown line, all the way from Bogotá to Belencito. The green line is operational to, if I can find it here, this little town here called Nemocon. Just part of that green line is usable. The black line is usable all the way to this place called Facatativa here. And the red line doesn't exist anymore. There is no track anymore. So a couple of historical pictures. First of all, this was taken in August 1969 when the locomotive was number 8. I don't know the source of this photo, unfortunately. Maybe someone can tell me where it came from. But it shows the number 8 working in 1969. It says 2 years earlier it was derelict at the works and apparently for scrap. So that's where we assume that it was restored maybe once in the 1960s. Here's a picture from 1970, January 1970. This is from Trevor Rowe's The Railways of South America. And you can see still a coal burner at that time. Sometimes they switch them backwards and forwards. This is and it's operational at that time. We don't know what happened after 1970 when it was abandoned again. But this is what it looked like in 1995 in the workshops at El Corzo. You can see a lot of parts missing, a lot of damage. You would never think this was restorable, but it was. Here's another picture of the other side here. You can see, you'll see this, let me go back to that previous picture. You'll see this damage here on the side here. And that's what it still looked like when we towed it out in 2011. So that's the state in 1995. This is in 2011. You can see the damage still here. This is when it's in Bogota. Now we've got weeds growing in it in the top here. A lot of things missing, including the builder's plate, which is missing from about here. And all the sheathing is rusted. There are some other locomotives around it too, but this one, it was decided to restore this one because it was the smallest locomotive. There is another smaller one behind it here, but no one knew who the owner of that was. So we couldn't do much with that one, unfortunately, but so we decided to restore the number 8. This is the inspection that was done first of all by the team leader, Federico Renales. Without Federico, this project wouldn't have happened either. Federico inspected everything before we decided to go ahead with the project and committed his time to heading up the project. It was also very easy for him, as you can see later on, to get in and out of the firebox because he's a very small guy. He's in his 70s. I think he was in his 70s when we started the project. But so here he is inside the firebox inspecting the tubes of the locomotive before we decided to go ahead with the project. And then on April 28th, 2011, we towed the locomotive from there's a line of locomotives behind here that are out in the open, unfortunately, but we towed the number 8 to the workshops, which are just adjacent to the siding, so not very far. But again, you can see the damage on this side as well. Pistons missing, connecting rods missing, a lot of parts missing. All the brass parts were in a secure location, but a lot had been stolen off it over the years. And this is when we backed it into the workshops here using another locomotive here. This is a steam locomotive that was working that day. And just to show you the difference, to sort of spoil it in a way, but this is the before picture, obviously. And then superimposed at the same location is the finished project in July of 2012, just 15 months later. And she's in steam on that day. So let's go through the process, what happened. First of all, they had to dismantle everything. So it took several months to take everything off the locomotive, down to the frame and the boiler. This is inside the workshops here. These workshops are date back to 1913. This is one of the other Baldwin locomotives here, number 75. The steam locomotives used to be used every weekend on the trip from Bogota, but now they're obviously the last year it's been very different, and they had cut down the schedule to like once every 2 weeks. But it's still a place in the world where you can see steam operational. So this is getting further stripped down here, down to the basics, the boiler and the frame. At this point, the wheels are taken off. So all the work was done inside the workshops. By September, everything had been stripped down and sandblasted. You can see taken down to the basics. They left the front bogie wheels on there. And then painted with primer. There was some problem with asbestos during the process, but they seem to take care of that. As with all these old locomotives, asbestos is a problem sometimes. Then they painted the frame and the boiler black, reinstalled the wheels after they have all the machinery for turning the wheels there. There's a couple of the guys on the team here. All the wheels were turned, the tires were changed for some not so worn tires that they had on location. There's Federico going in and out of the boiler, checking the tubes. He spent a lot of time in there. Fortunately, it's very easy for him to get in and out. Some of the parts had to be made from new. Some parts were missing. One of the connecting rods was missing. Fortunately, from the other one, they could use that as a pattern and make the one that was missing, the second one. This is Andres here, who is a very enthusiastic railway enthusiast. He was actually online with us this morning. Spent a lot of time down there, but all the machinery was there in the workshops. There were some new wheel parts that had to be made. This is Francisco making some of the parts for the wheels. A new smokebox door. This is the old one on the left here, not an original by any means. This is more of an original pattern for the smokebox door. And with the smokebox door installed and started replacing some of the parts. New sand and steam domes were made as well. You can see them on the floor here. I was lucky enough to be working in Bogota at the time this was happening. So every month I worked down there, and I was able to take pictures and record the progress of the project, which was lucky. So we have a photographic representation of the project. By September 2011, everything was looking good. They started putting the parts back on again. And the boiler test was done on November 2011. And things like the air compressor They had to find these. These were missing. They're very rare in Colombia, rare in many places probably, but fortunately we found one of them that was needed because it was missing off the locomotive. Pistons reinstalled. And it's beginning to take shape. By January 2012, the chimney had been repaired, with the generator was installed, pistons were installed, wheels back on. Again, you can see another locomotive here, the number 72 in the background, and one of the diesels that work at the tourist train operation as well. The sheathing and the cladding was then added in January 2012 around the pistons, around the boiler. And then that was all primed as well. You can see the primer on there. The cow catcher on the front was installed. This was missing. This had to be made from scratch. And they made a new front number plate because that was missing as well, to install on the number 8. Some of the final touches they make all the difference in the world. We didn't have the original number 8, don't know where it went to, but we did have some other ones that we could make the pattern from. So this is Pablo with the replacement number plate for the front. Almost finished in June 2012. This is when I was able to visit with my family. Still some painting to do, but basically all there. I believe all these railings were new as well, because they were missing or damaged. The cab and the tender were 2 separate projects. This was the original condition of the tender, and the cab is right here. This is the oldest coach in Colombia, an old wooden coach here, which unfortunately is in the open as well. We wanted to restore that to use with this locomotive. But those are the original conditions of the tender and the cab. And then it was restored separately in 2011, November 2011. They've taken the tank off and flipped it over. Here you can see the cab in the background here. So the tender restoration was basically, it was completely restored. There was so much rust on this. A lot of welding to do, a lot of basic repairs to be done on it. So here we have an intermediate stage here where at least half the tender is brand new. Still upside down, being completed again. The only original part, you can still see the logo, the original logo on the side here. Flipped it back over again and started finishing up the restoration of the tender. Here you can see the workshops again in the background here. This is only about 50 meters from where the locomotive is, but outside of the workshops. This reminded me that at this time I did my only trip to India, and rode on one of your locomotives there in February of 2012. That was my one and only trip to India, but that happened right in the middle of this restoration. It was a great trip. So back to the tender, a new tender back in March of 2012, now primed, ready to go back onto the bogies, onto the trucks. So here's the platform and the tender bogies, and then the tank is right here. You can see the tank, which would go back on top there. The cabin, this was the state in November 2011, and in March 2012, completely repaired, new wood interior here and installed back on the locomotive. And the first steam was raised on the locomotive about 40 years later, if we can figure out, on June the 5th, 2012. It was a very emotional moment for Dr. Rodriguez, because I think it was the only time his workshop had done this, was take a locomotive from a complete wreck and build it back up again to a working locomotive. So a very emotional moment for Eduardo Rodriguez. And as you can see there is Dr. Rodriguez and Federico here in front of the locomotive on June 5th, 2012, which is still painted in the primer here. The first run where we actually took it out and with passengers was on July the 5th, 2012. There's the interior of the cab. Very basic since it's 1921. Here are the brakes over here, and not much of a seat really on that side. But we took a group of people out in July on the locomotive, July 2012. Here's the crew for the first run. This was on July 2012 as well. 7 guys here, which help us take the first run out north of Bogota. This is at Usaquén Station, north of Bogota. And when I think this is right before we left that day, a very nice photo of myself and Eduardo Rodriguez in front of the locomotive just before we left on that trip in 2012. This is the team. There is one guy missing. There's the guy that did the welding on the tank. His name was Jose Ruge. He's missing from the photo, but these are the main guys that did all the work on the locomotive, restoring it from a wreck to a working locomotive, basically. A very talented group. There are about 25 engineers. There were about 25 engineers working in the workshops here at Bogota before the pandemic. Not sure how many are working now. But they can do anything on steam locomotives. They can restore anything. And there was a lot of media coverage at the time too. That photo came from a newspaper article, but all the newspapers got the story in 2011 and 2012, and ran the story about the locomotive. I know our previous talk was about modeling. I was last year or no, 2019. 2019, I was fortunate enough to meet these 2 guys in Cali, Colombia, Francisco Bonillo and Juan Pablo here. You'll notice Juan Pablo is a very young guy, but he actually made a model of the locomotive, and there's a very active modeling society based in Cali, in the Cali area, and in other parts of Colombia as well, who are very talented. These 2 guys here, Francisco and Juan Pablo, incredibly talented when it comes to building models and model locomotives and model airplanes too. But this was made from scratch. I think he did it in 2 weeks. Made it in 2 weeks. An HO gauge locomotive. So this is some more recent pictures of it working. September 2012. We ran it again. We ran several trips, as many times as possible. April 2013, we took the number 8 out again with a group of people. This is the water tank. We have to take the water tank with us. Watering facilities are not functioning anymore. 2014, that's in Bogotá station. This is the old control tower here. And then in 2014, 4 of the 5 locomotives were fired up for a group from Railway Touring Company and departed the station. This is the station at Bogotá behind here with the roof. All 4 of them departed at the same time. There's not many places you can do that or see that anymore. But that was done on September 2014. And you can see us departing. That was when we were departing with an enthusiast charter train in September of 2014 here. And 2017, again, another trip. This is the scenery behind Bogotá, the mountains behind Bogotá. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to Bogotá last month to see the locomotive fired up, but she was fired up on February 2021. Some of the things need a little bit of attention, maybe the woodwork on the door here and the window frames, but otherwise she's in great condition, still functioning and still running. The last bit of the story I wanted to fill in was one of the sister locomotives. This is the number 4. You can just see the number 4 here at Bogotá station. There's that control tower again. But this picture was taken in July 1964. This locomotive, the number 4, originally was 54817, and I went on a trip to Eritrea in 2018, I believe it was. And I met a guy on the trip called Bob Wetham, and some of you may know Bob from his publications on South and Central America. And he said, "Oh, I have the builder's plate from the number 4, which is 54817, and the number 8, which was the number 3, was 1 number less than this, 54816." And so Bob made a wax cast of this, and he took it down when I went down with him in 2019. And that's the last piece we want to put on, is the builder's plate, which goes right here on the number 8, which was missing. And this is just a final picture of myself and Eduardo Rodriguez in front of the restored locomotive, the number 8, 100 years old this year. And I think that's the last picture. Yeah, the last picture. If anyone has any questions, I'll answer them. If I can get my screen up here.
Yeah, if you can remove screen share, then yeah.
Stop sharing it. There we go.
Yeah.
Do I have to give the host back to you or not?
No, that's fine. So
Okay.
there is a comment from Mr. Raghunandan. This is a fascinating, richly detailed presentation. We are proposing to the Indian government to restore a 2-feet narrow gauge locomotive in Bangalore. If not to running condition, then at least to a well-restored plinth condition. This presentation gives a lot of clues, and he says that he would like to connect with you to know more about the entire restoration process.
Yep, that's perfectly fine. I can, and that was from TR, from how do you pronounce his name?
Raghunandan. Yeah.
I'll send him my email address. Will that work?
Yeah, we will share with him your email.
You can call him Raghu.
Yeah.
Raghu will do better than Raghu Nandan.
Yeah.
Raghu. Okay, Raghu.
Yeah. The next question was from JL Singh. Where did the funding for this restoration come from? Any changes or equipment that are required to the change standards, such as the safety standards?
As you know from my introduction, I'm a geologist and not an engineer. So, but the thing that I wanted to do, it's like climbing a mountain. Why do you climb a mountain? Because it's there. And why did I restore this? Because I could. Basically, it was timing. The timing was correct because Federico was available to do this. The team was available to do this. I had some spare cash. I funded this totally myself. So it was a self-funded project, if you like. No one. That means I made the decision very quickly. Dr. Rodriguez, the agreement with him, we didn't go through any lawyers or anything like that. It was purely a handshake agreement, which in South and Central America means a lot. A lot of agreements are just handshakes. And so it was we decided very quickly to do it. And that made a difference too. I think if we'd have waited around, we wouldn't have had the team available to do it. They had a gap in their work, the other work at the workshop, so they could concentrate on restoring the number 8.
There's a question from Arun Bhagra. A question about the cost involved. I mean, you clearly funded this whole thing. He's asking basically in comparison to restoration of the Flying Scotsman logo in UK, that took quite a long time, a decade, and a humongous cost. So how would you compare? I mean, what was the reason for this, success of quick restoration of this logo?
What was the reason? Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, again, it was because I wanted to do it. It was there. It's like there were 5 locomotives sitting outside in the Bogotá station area. Mm-hmm. And one day I went out there with Eduardo, and this was probably a year after I met him. And he said he was trying to sell the locomotives. There were like 5 of them. And he asked me if I could help him put an ad in one of the railway magazines. And I helped him put an ad together. I can't remember what magazine it was, probably Narrow Gauge or Railway World or something like that in the UK. And then he said to me, "Do you want to restore one?" And I thought about it for about a minute. And then I said, "Okay, why not?" So that's how it started. And again, no contract, no lawyers involved, handshakes. That was it.
That's quite a fascinating story.
So a bit different than the Flying Scotsman, yeah.
Yeah. There is a feedback from John Humphreys. He says, "Great presentation, Steve. Nice to see you again." See, there's one problem we generally face in India is with the disappearing skill sets. There are very few engineers or workmen still working with steam locomotives.
Yes.
So how were you able to get that skill set in Colombia when you decided to revive? I mean, are people still skilled there, or they are continuously retrained? How does it work there?
They still have the skills in Bogotá, and as you can see from the photo of the engineers, a lot of them are quite young because they're learning from the masters. Federico being one of the masters there, and Eduardo himself he's an engineer, and they're trying to transfer that knowledge to younger people. It is difficult. There's only 1 or 2 people that know how to fire and drive the number 8 because it's a smaller locomotive than the other ones. But historically, Colombia, they never made their own locomotives in Colombia. When the railway system there, the steam locomotives were working, they could repair them, they could replace 80 to 90% of the parts on a steam locomotive, but they could never make one completely. They couldn't do the boilers, for instance. They couldn't make boilers in Colombia, but they could do everything else. And that they have all the tools and the equipment in the workshop in Bogotá at the Sabana station. As I said, it's been there since 1913, but they've been very enthusiastic about transferring the knowledge from the older engineers to the younger engineers.
Yeah,
that's something you can't. If you don't do that, then you do lose it.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, there is a lose it.
Yeah.
There's a question from Raghu. Did you have a problem with the eroded leaf springs? Now, this is a common problem with plinth locomotives in India. Now, springs lose their temper and rust away, leading to the locomotive slowly sinking into the ground or losing its chase's alignment.
That's probably it's a question. It's not a question for me since I'm not an engineer. I don't know about specifically the leaf springs. I could probably look through my pictures to see whether they look like replaced leaf springs. And I believe they may have been, but I'm not 100% sure about that. They do have a lot of parts laying around in Bogotá there. As you could see in the yard, there are lots of wheels and other parts. And they probably did replace some of them, if not all of them. I don't know for sure, though.
Okay. There's a question from and a feedback from Andrew Gibbons. There's a great account of a loco restoration project. How much interest is there from people in Colombia for traveling on steam tourist trains?
You'd be amazed. It's actually the general population, even though they haven't been around steam locomotives. It's not what you call a railway society like Japan or India or England or Germany. But they don't even have a transport museum in the country. That's one big problem. But they have enthusiasm, and when you take these locomotives out, the trains are packed. I mean, the larger locomotives. My locomotive will probably pull 3 or 4 coaches maximum. The larger locomotives can pull 12, 15 coaches, and those trains are packed. 500 people go on these Sunday trips. Usually they're Saturdays and Sundays. Like I said, I don't know what the schedule is now. But they're packed and they have a great time. They have music on the train. They have 3 bands playing on the train. They have food on the train. There's a restaurant car. Anyone who's been there will tell you that it's a very memorable experience. And I encourage anyone that goes to Bogotá to check out the website, touristtrend.com.co, I think it is, for Colombia. But anyone there, if you look up, you'll see the Christmas trains. They they decorate the trains for Christmas, and run trains at Christmas time at night. But everyone stops, and you create huge traffic jams. I mean, there's still level crossings there over major highways through Bogotá, and then when a train goes by, it stops the traffic, but everyone is always in a good mood and waves. They're not getting angry or anything like that the traffic stop. So they have a great attitude in the country towards railways, and the railways are expanding slowly. I see the system turning around. There are freight trains pulled by diesels, obviously, in other parts of the country, but the railway system is still in place in a lot of places. The track is still there. The right of way is still there, but it's been neglected for a long time.
How easy or how difficult it is to work in coordination with the official government railway system there, because private charters and running a private tourist train is a different ballgame altogether. So how reciprocative is the government towards this in Colombia?
Yeah, well, the railways were sold off in 1992, so that means that the maintenance of the railways was sold off. The government has no involvement anymore, except I guess in contracts, granting contracts to people, but it's all privatized. There is no national railway system there anymore. So if you could get a contract to operate a certain part of the railway, you negotiate with the government and you get that. It happens in various parts of the country. So to do a restoration, you know, the locomotives, the number 8 and the other locomotives were purchased by Dr. Rodriguez in 1992, 93. So they're not government property anymore. He leases, I think he leases the property where the workshop is and the station building. No train. Well, the only trains that run out of there right now on a regular basis are student trains in the morning, where they take thousands actually of students north to the military university very early in the morning, and they continue to use the trains to take the students to the university, but there is no regular passenger timetable service.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today and giving us this wonderful presentation. I am sure it would have motivated a lot of people here on this forum today, because steam restoration is currently a big on thing here in India also. It's a fast disappearing heritage, and the way, you know, in just 15 months you could just speed up the entire process. It's a learning process for all of us here.
Yeah. I wish I did take some videos, I think, but I didn't want to show those this morning because it's sometimes the internet makes it not very pleasant to watch them. But yeah, I hopefully gave you an idea of what it's like to go through the restoration process. And anyone that wants to contact me with any information, they can feel free to send me a message via email. Did you say you were giving out email address?
Yeah, we will do that. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.
Yes, so thank you for organizing everything.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Dave.
Bye. So, yeah, over to you, Mike.